Today we're working on lavender fields. We're making the space in between all of the little lavender that we started yesterday. The purpose of what we're doing today is to learn to control your paintbrush and to be able to show a variation in color. So I'm starting with just a standard green straight out of the palette. With watercolor paints, you're able to use your paintbrush kind of like a pencil. And I'm just very lightly touching just the tip of my paintbrush onto what is just a standard green. I don't have a lot of water in my paintbrush. The purpose of what I'm doing, again, is to learn to control your paintbrush and also learn to control the amount of water and paint you have in your brush. What do you do if you make a mistake? Well, that's something that we can talk about more. When I put a little too much, if you see this little tiny piece right here, okay, it's not a mistake, but let's just say you didn't like that, okay? How do I fix it? Number one, I can take a paper towel and I can blot it, okay? Don't ever rub a paper towel on a paper, but you could blot it. Or I just cleaned off my brush and I'm going to squeeze all the water out of my brush and watch what I do. I'm just going to soak up that paint with my brush. All right, now I'm going to go in with a little more color variation, and I'm going to use my blue-green color that I mixed up. It's just a little green mixed up with some blue. And what I'm doing is kind of pulling my paintbrush. I'm starting towards the bottom because that's the direction that the grasses would grow. And I've made a little too much paint on here. It's a big blob. I don't want a big blob. If you have blobs, I want to show you how to take care of that. I cleaned off my brush, and now I'm just going to soak up that paint with my brush, and then I'm going to use it to move that paint elsewhere. I want it to resemble grasses. So what I'm doing, and I know I'm repeating myself, I am, with just the point of my brush, I'm dragging the paint from the bottom-ish. And I'm not making perfect straight lines. The grasses are, in nature, grasses don't grow in perfect, straight, tall lines. They kind of go astray. Isn't this relaxing to be able to do watercolor painting? It'd be even better if I had little birdies making little bird noises, and if I had my lavender in my diffuser, it would just add to the mood. And I know you all would appreciate that so much, wouldn't you?
Could you actually tap on some bird noises?
All right, now I'm just going to add another color variation. And what this doing is also creating I guess you could say, it's giving the illusion of what real grass is going to look like. Real grass is going to have reflection of the sun. Real grass is going to show shadows. So I'm going to add just a bit of the yellow-green in there, and I'm continuing to make little grasses. In my last demonstration, I talked to you about in the foreground. What happens in the foreground is you see lots and lots of fine detail. In the foreground, it's as if the person or the viewer is closest to those objects. So in this case, we're about to move more into the middle ground area where the details become a little bit more fuzzy, okay? So now I have made a little row of grass. Now I'm getting ready to do my next row of lavender. The lavender is going to appear closer together, and the reason for that is as it gets a little bit farther away from the viewer, you see a little bit less details. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and rinse my brush, and I'm ready to go ahead and put in some more lavender. And I'm just gonna use my straight violet from my palette. And I'm gonna go in again with those little dots, but this time there's not gonna be much space between them. And if your dots are becoming blobs, try to use less water. So see, the lavender's gonna be closer together. And right now I'm not touching any of my grasses. And the reason is because the grass is still wet. So for right now, I'm just trying to avoid that green area, and then I'll show you what we do to bring those all together. Lavender comes to a point. The actual lavender flowers come to a point, so we're going to be real mindful of that. As I'm painting today, my violet looks so much darker than what I did yesterday. Well, the paint is wet. So that's one thing. And also, sometimes I notice, gosh, when I was painting yesterday, I really did put on my colors a lot more saturated, where it looks a lot deeper in color. Here's what I can do. I can go back to my lavender from yesterday and watch. I'm going to lightly touch each of those just a tiny, tiny bit with a little stipple. And that's going to make it, more consistent. I'm just giving a little bit of that deep purple, that violet that I was using for this next row, because I feel like I need some darker areas to match what I'm doing in that second row of lavender. And again, I'm just resting my hand on my desk so that I can control the paint and not make big blobs. And I'm just lightly doing a little tap, tap, tap of the tip of my brush. Now see, it's just adding a whole lot of dimension to the colors, and it's bringing it forward. It's making it pop out. And it also just makes it look that much more detailed because I went back and I'm applying a little bit of that darker pigment. It just means that I didn't mix it with as much water today. Sometimes that happens. All right, now I'm going to go back to what I was doing in that second row. And again, these lavender are closer together because they're farther apart. You don't see the space in between them. This is why I work really small. So we're working with a 3-inch by 4-inch paper. And that is purposefully done so that you can focus on those fine details and not get overwhelmed. Especially beginning artists tend to get a little bit overwhelmed with really fine detail. If you go too large of a painting, it's really easy for you to forget about those fine details and rush to get to painting the whole thing. So when it comes to watercolor painting, I like to have my students work small. Nothing wrong with that. Now, you can hopefully see from my video that my lavender are much closer together than they were when I did my last video. So the intention is to be able to give the illusion of what you would see in nature. Now I'm just going to give a little variation because I don't want this to become a perfect straight line of lavender. That's not what happens in nature. In nature, you're going to see variations. You're going to see a little bit different heights, that kind of thing. So that's important to notice and pay attention to anytime you do a painting of a landscape or something that's in nature. You want to try to pay attention to what it is that you would actually see. So right now my lines are starting to kind of look very, very similar to each other. And I want it to look natural. And now I'm almost complete with my second row of lavender. Now I'm going to begin going back in with some of my green. I don't want my green to blend in with my violet, so I'm going to go ahead and stop my video and give my paper a little time to dry.